Today on CityCast DC, are you vegan? Vegan curious? Or maybe just likely to go out to dinner sometime with a vegan? Tom Sietsema from the Washington Post is here to talk through the best of DC's burgeoning vegan and vegetarian dining options. Today is Thursday, June 6th. I'm Michael Schaefer, and here's what DC is talking about. Hey, Tom.
Good morning. Happy to be here again.
Hey, so you do this chat with your readers at the Post. You know, it's got people asking you for advice, and it's got tips, and it's got my favorite thing, horror stories. And I've noticed a number of them involve travails of being a vegan or vegetarian diner in DC.
That happens sometimes. Most recently, there was a party of 4 that went out. 2 people were meat eaters, 2 people were vegetarians. And the meat burgers came out first, and they went to the vegetarians who dug in and realized quickly that, whoops, these are meat burgers, not our order. So there were 2 things going on. 1, the vegetarians got the beef, and 2, there was a pacing problem with only half the people getting their dishes. And once you consume something, it's really hard to unconsume it, right? And so I think my advice there was to just wait until all the burgers were done, and hopefully the restaurant would make a huge apology to the people who mistakenly ate beef. A lot of people said eating meat or not is more of a choice. It can't be compared to something like, whoops, I got peanuts in the dish going to the person who is allergic to peanuts. People tend not to be allergic to vegetables. So it wasn't the high crime that the vegetarians thought it might have been at the time.
Yeah, but at the same time, I mean, there's a lot of people who are vegetarians that do so for reasons of ethics, and they are paying for what's supposed to be a nice night out. And you sort of concluded that this restaurant, which had sort of comped them the price of the meat burgers, but that's it, didn't make nearly a big enough fuss just to acknowledge that they'd sort of ruined their night, even if they hadn't nearly killed them, you know?
Sure. I think the 2 vegetarians at the table certainly deserve to be comped. I have issues with everyone being comped, but it was a pacing issue too. Throw that in, and I think a really cool restaurant would have said, hey, this is on us. Sorry for screwing up.
So my other takeaway from this also was that stereotypically in the old days, you thought of a vegetarian restaurant or even a restaurant that served a lot of vegetarian food as, you know, a kind of hippie place. Maybe it was not a ideal, beautiful date night spot, even if you like the ethics of its food. And that's not really the case anymore. You can go out for burgers and it's pretty normal to have a vegetarian option. Mm-hmm. Am I right about that?
You're absolutely onto something there. You know, increasingly it is so easy to go out and have a meatless meal. I mean, the stereotype of the hippy dippy places, earthy, crunchy, like oat-packed burgers are sort of ancient history right now. In fact, you know, with my 2 favorite meatless restaurants right now, one is fine dining. That would be Oyster, and Shaw, suitable for a special occasion. And the other is a new Vietnamese vegetarian restaurant called Chai. It's spelled Chay, but it's pronounced Chai in Falls Church. And that's more for everyday dining. What I like about that is that this mainstream effect, you no longer have to go sit in less than comfortable surroundings or get okay service. You're now getting really polished vegetarian or vegan cooking in places where hospitality, service, and the setting are as well thought out as the food itself.
So tell me about those 2 places. What's awesome about Oyster? Is that the place I can take my meat-loving friend to convert them?
Absolutely. You know, I intentionally did that when I first reviewed Oyster. I went with 2 people who were vegetarians and 2 people who were dedicated meat eaters. And Oyster is the creation of Rob Rubba, whose ribs I used to devour at Hazel, which is closed, Hazel in DC. But he gave up meat in 2017. And what I appreciate about Oyster is not just the chef's creative approach to vegetables, but also his commitment to sustainable and eco-friendly food sources. Mushrooms, for instance. One of the oysters in oyster refers to oyster mushrooms, which is a favorite of a lot of chefs, oyster mushrooms. And the other oyster, it refers to oyster, the bivalve. And you think, well, wait, this is a vegetarian vegan restaurant. But there is some discussion in the vegan vegetarian community that oysters are okay because they don't have a central nervous system. And there are several dishes that have a single oyster in them at Oyster. And there's the option of leaving it out. So I'm just going to throw that out there. But what I like about Oyster, again, besides the food, is that food scraps get repurposed in cocktails, and the chef uses lids instead of plastic wrap to cover the food in the kitchen. And they take those oyster shells and turn them into votives. So in ways large and small, they are repurposing a lot of things that otherwise would have been tossed out. Food-wise, one of my favorite memories from Oyster was during the summer. And it was this dish. It was a circle of watermelon with a salad of chili hit peanuts and this minty shiso and these sour grape-sized cucamelons. And there was a single oyster tucked inside this salad, and it was splashed with ginger vinaigrette. And it was absolutely delicious. And it spoke to summer, and it was colorful. And it was one of those dishes that you had to sort of hold on to, you didn't want to share, and you were sorry to see go at the end. I also like the fact that, he uses butter, but not cream, milk, or eggs. And cheese might be whipped up from, say, pumpkin seeds that are pureed with nutritional yeast and cooked fermented rice. And I'll tell you what, I'm saying this now, but it makes a pretty convincing ricotta cheese when those three ingredients are tossed together in the blender. And it's a tasting menu. Everyone eats the same thing for the most part. And you leave that dinner. Most recently, I think it was $95 for a number of courses. And you leave satisfied. You're not hungry afterwards. You marvel at the creativity of the chef. You get this great service. And again, it's an example of a place that you can eat meatless and feel as if you're dining in an expense account place. And the memories, like eggplant schnitzel. Why wouldn't you turn eggplant into a schnitzel? For dessert, there were roasted figs with this piney syrup and a vegan pecan mousse that was as good as I've had in any restaurant. So again, it shows creativity. It's not just a sorbet or something that doesn't show as much thought. The only problem I have with Oyster is that it's fewer than 38 seats. So reservations have to be planned in advance, and they are hard to get. I had to book 3 months out the last time I ate there. And the time before that, I was lucky to be invited by a friend who had booked 3 months out himself.
Let's be real, lawsuits are not fun, but with Paulson & Nace, at least they're a little easier. Paulson & Nace is a DC law firm in every sense of the word. It was founded here in 1979. Partner Chris Nace is a local who cares deeply about the DC community, even serving on the board of the local branch of the Living Classrooms Foundation in his free time. Nace and his associates Samantha Peters and Maya Perry handle medical malpractice, wrongful death, and other complex injury cases. And they don't just settle every case. They'll go to court. They'll fight for you. Paulson & Nace has even been recognized as one of U.S. News' best law firms. So if you have been hurt or lost a loved one because of someone else's mistake or negligence, call Paulson & Nace for a no-obligation consultation. Visit www.paulsonandnace.com. That's PAULSONANDNACE.com. Or call 202-463-1999.
Experience a live performance with premium seating at Warner Theater or the Fillmore Silver Spring. Live Nation premium amenities totally change the concert experience with things like complimentary parking and private entry. Members also have access to in-seat wait service and exclusive food and beverage menus. Trust me, there is no better way to experience a live performance of a band, comedian, or even podcaster you love. Premium members get access and offerings before doors open to the VIP Speakeasy-style 1924 Lounge at Warner Theater and Vertigo Lounge at the Fillmore. Visit premium.livenation.com for more information or contact Mary Claire Griffin at maryclairegriffin@livenation.com or at 202-626-8255.
So that's $95 last time you were there, meaning it's a nice date night, but maybe not hey, I'm hungry, I'm going to pop out to bite kind of place. What about chai?
Chai is a husband and wife, mom and pop, with a lot of style. The owners are T. Lee and his wife, the chef, is Lan Tran. She just got tired of seeing what happens to animals in the food chain, and she decided to do away with meat in her cooking. And before she opened her restaurant in Falls Church, she got stuck on a trip to Vietnam, and some Buddhist monks took her in. And while she was with those Buddhist monks, she learned and taught some of what she was doing with vegetarian food already. And if you know anything about Buddhist monks, they tend to eat, a lot of plant-based food and things like that, and they do beautiful things with it. So she brought some of that style that she learned over the pandemic and brought it to chai. She does, for instance, like a clam dip with rice crackers. A clam, I say in quotes, that is every bit as good as the real clam dip that I've eaten at, Eden Center. She does these tapioca dumplings, which are mushrooms and tofu and carrots and onions wrapped in banana leaves. She does a great papaya salad with a vegetarian fish sauce that's as good as any papaya salad in the area. And I just like the thought and effort that goes into all that food.
Tell me about the vibe and the price point. Was it a nice place to go on a date or something?
Yeah, the price point, that's a place we could go on a Tuesday night and spend like $40 for two, because they do not have a liquor license. They don't plan on getting even beer and wine. And that's just fine. The food does come out pretty fast, but it's fast food with a lot of style. They had a Vietnamese artist friend of theirs do these big outsized lotuses on the wall, and they spray painted some woven baskets with some happy slogans and things like that. So it looks really nice. They have a little tiny fountain in there. The food comes up very fast, as I said, but it's also a really attractive place to spend a little time if you choose to linger. But unfortunately, the people crowding the door right now don't let you linger. You get those stares from people like, it looks like you're done.
Hey, you may not feel guilty about eating meat, but you feel guilty about displacing those people.
Exactly.
Wait, so I know you're not the dedicated vegetarian critic, but are there other vegetarian or vegan only places that you steer people?
Yeah, there's a place an Indian restaurant that I really like in Laurel. It's called Amber Spice.
Mm-hmm.
They have both meat and lots of vegetable dishes on the menu. The brothers who own it are from South India. And if you've been to South India, Kerala and points, you know that is some of the best vegetarian food in the country, I think. That's a place that I really like to go. And they, too, take great care with making the place look nice, too. You may think you don't like okra, but I remember turning naysayers into converts when they tasted okra at Amber Spice. They cube it, they season it with mustard seeds, cumin seeds, and half a dozen other jazz notes. And they fry this to a tender crunch, and it's just really lovely. They don't use a lot of oil in there. Fat carries flavor, but they don't use a lot of oil, and they just so rely on really good ingredients and that wonderful spice cabinet to make vegetables sing. There's also an egg curry made with coconut milk, tomatoes, and onions that's really good. And they serve that with this flaky bread called paratha. I like that a lot. And they do kebabs and everything.
Other spots that either fly under the radar or people ought to know about?
Well, places that I think that there are a lot of mainstream restaurants. I always tell people if they're looking for meatless dishes, they should seek out Chinese, Indian, and Ethiopian. We have a lot of Ethiopian restaurants in the area, are really good. And Ethiopian in particular is relatively inexpensive and accessible.
So meaning these are cuisines where vegetarian eating is much more part of the tradition, so you don't have to get into this thing of what's the real hamburger and what's the phony one.
Right, exactly. They tend to just have dishes that celebrate vegetables, right? For instance, I have two tests for Ethiopian restaurants when I go to them. One is kitfo, which is ground raw meat. It's like Ethiopian steak tartare, seasoned with this.
Not vegetarian.
No, it is not. But it's this is one of my tests. The other test at an Ethiopian restaurant for me is its vegetarian sampler. And I look at that for how the lentils and cabbage and tomatoes and salads are seasoned, but also for the variety on the plate. And what I like about that is that Ethiopian food is presented on a platter of injera, which you can also eat. And you eat with the injera. So you scoop things, you rip a piece of the injera off, eat it. And some of the best eating, Ethiopians know this, some of the best eating is what is left on the plate, the little scraps and things like that. And you eat that salad and stew stained injera like the next day or for midnight snack. And it's so healthful because injera tends to be relatively light and it's made with teff, which is a very nutritious grain. And that's sort of the delicacy from an Ethiopian meal out. And it's something that I've been known to bring home and eat the next day. And you can do that with vegetables.
If you're going to an Indian or Chinese place, what do you order if you want to not have a meat dish?
Well, for instance, a lot of Indian restaurants have thalis, which are like a little tiny buffet that's brought on a silver platter. What I like about those, a lot of restaurants have meat and veg versions of those dishes. One of my favorites is served at the Bombay Club downtown. It's the veteran Indian restaurant from Ashok Bajaj, and they've had thalis on their menu forever. But it's like this little celebration, and it's not a lot of money, and you get salads and stews and like that. You can do that for under $30, and it's really a little feast, a little banquet for one. You can get them larger groups too, but I really like those a lot. In fact, sometimes I just go to an Indian restaurant and gravitate towards the, saag paneer, that is homemade cottage cheese cubes with garlicky, gingery spinach. That's another go-to of mine. You can get lots of things that don't have meat in Indian restaurants.
And you really liked VEGZ in Adams Morgan.
I did.
How do I say that?
Veg. Yeah, veggies. Yeah, I've never had to say it in public before, so I assume I'm just going to that place spelled VEGZ, veg. I also like, we have so many Afghan restaurants in the area. One of my favorites is Arakosia in McLean. They do a great job there. You can, they have family dinners, like a 3-course menu, including a bottle of wine. And they also have, vegetarian and vegan samplers. So you get to taste a bunch of things, right? And their cooking tends to be very homey. And with the vegetarian deals, you get like a choice of an appetizer, entree, side dish, and dessert for about $24 a person last time I checked. And I think that's a great deal. They were doing that during the pandemic, and I thought that was very smart.
Well, unfortunately, there's one other last impression at a restaurant, which is you get the check eventually.
Well, there's that.
We've read a lot about the prices of meat going up, supply chain issues, and part of inflation. I'm wondering if you've noticed, have prices for vegetarian items risen also? Have they risen at the same rate, less, more?
I'm glad you asked that, because I was just at Alias, another fine dining restaurant that just opened in Warrenton, Virginia, and they priced their vegetarian menu at the same price as their meat menu. And I know some people might look askance at that, but when you think about it, cultivating, sourcing really good, unusual ingredients is not the sole purview of people who are looking for beef or fish or whatever. It takes time and effort to seek out people who might grow vegetables for you and specific vegetables for you. And so people need to keep that in mind when they do that. And also, they're not just serving you a bunch of vegetables on a plate, they're putting them in really interesting dishes. One, for instance, was house-made ravioli stuffed with ají amarillo, which is a Peruvian pepper, and pureed carrots. And there's a little crackle on top. It was sunny golden pasta with this bright filling that it was sweet from the carrots and hot from the peppers. And it was really delicious. I was sorry there were only 3 or 4 ravioli on the plate there, but that was really good.
And that's about an hour away, you say?
It is. It's about an hour away from DC, and well worth the journey, as Michelin likes to say.
Hey, Tom, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I always enjoy talking to you.
And take me out eating with you sometime.
Would you like that? I'm happy to do that.
I would love that.
Awesome. Deal.
And that is all for today here on CityCast DC. If you enjoyed the show, maybe share it with a friend over a vegetarian meal sometime. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye.
veg. I've never heard them say it either to me. Yeah, that's a fun place.
We should just call them on the phone and
Yes.
see what they say when they answer.
Who is this?